There's just something about a mystery, isn't there? That puzzle you can't quite solve. It just keeps turning over in your mind.
Definitely.
Well, today we're throwing ourselves headfirst into a collection of some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries.
Hmm.
Think of this as like your fast track to getting a real handle on these enduring enigmas without getting totally bogged down in endless research.
Right, cutting through the noise.
We're here to pull out the crucial insights and, try and make sense of them.
Absolutely. And what immediately grabs you looking at these sources is just the sheer variety of puzzles humanity has stumbled upon.
Yeah.
We've got ancient head scratchers, disappearances that just defy explanation, some truly chilling crimes.
Oh, yeah.
And even the strange secrets held by, like, the frozen landscapes of Antarctica.
Yeah.
It's a real journey across the globe and through time, all focused on the unknown.
Exactly. And what's great about the material we've been looking at is its commitment to getting as close to the truth as possible.
Yeah, trying to be objective.
It synthesizes historical accounts, digs up archaeological findings, follows the threads of investigations, and incorporates scientific analysis to give us the most objective view possible.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's dive right in, starting with those incredible ancient enigmas that still baffle us.
A perfect place to start is with the Nazca lines. I mean, this massive network of lines and geoglyphs, large designs etched into the ground in the Peruvian desert.
Mm.
It's just staggering in its scale.
Staggering is the word.
We're talking hundreds of lines, geometric shapes, huge animal figures, some stretching for miles across this dry plateau.
Wow.
And it's not just some relic of the past. An astonishing 168 new geoglyphs were discovered as recently as 2022.
That's incredible. It's almost impossible to picture the sheer scale, right?
Mhm.
And what's perhaps even more remarkable is the relatively simple way they were created. It wasn't some lost super technology, was it?
No, not at all.
As I understand it, they basically just moved the darker pebbles on the surface to reveal the lighter sand underneath.
That's right.
Such a basic technique, but the foresight and planning needed to create those enormous and precise figures from ground level. That's the real mind bender.
It really is.
I remember reading about an experiment maybe in the 80s. It showed a small group could create a sizable line in just a few hours using simple tools.
Precisely. And what's intriguing is that contrast between the simplicity of the method and the immense complexity of the overall project.
Yeah.
It strongly suggests a highly organized society with a sophisticated understanding of how these figures would appear, even without, the advantage of seeing them from the air.
Right. That lack of a clear vantage point on the ground is really what fueled those initial theories about their purpose, wasn't it?
Exactly, like the idea that they were some kind of astronomical calendar or observatory.
Yeah, that one took hold early on with Paul Kosak, who famously called the Nazca Lines the largest astronomy book in the world, after noticing some alignments with the winter solstice.
Yeah.
And then Maria Reicha. She dedicated decades to meticulously mapping the lines and even linking some of the animal figures to constellations, like the monkey and Ursa Major.
Her dedication was amazing.
And she really fought to protect the site and debunk those wild alien landing strip ideas, too.
Absolutely. Reich's work was foundational, and that initial aerial perspective certainly made the astronomical interpretations seem very compelling.
For sure.
However, as research continued, scholars started to delve deeper into the cultural and environmental context of the Nazca people themselves.
Okay.
And interestingly, the focus sort of shifted towards more earthly concerns,
Mm.
particularly the absolutely vital role of water in such an arid region.
Exactly. That makes so much sense. The theory that these lines were connected to ritualistic water worship championed by researchers like Johann Reinhard and Anthony Aveni, it just fits when you consider how crucial water must have been for survival there.
Mm.
The idea that these lines were like sacred pathways for ceremonies and offerings to ensure rainfall and fertility, and that animals like the spider, monkey, and hummingbird held water-related symbolism in Andean cosmology, it really paints a very different picture than just a giant calendar in the sky.
It really does.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the broader understanding of the Nazca culture, their known expertise in water management, evidenced by their impressive system of underground aqueducts called puquillos,
Right, the Puquios.
that really strengthens the theories linking the lines to water. The suggestion by Prolex and Mabi that some lines might even point towards underground water sources or be related to these aqueducts, offers a very practical, grounded interpretation.
We also came across some other less mainstream ideas, like them being processional pathways or maybe even templates for textiles.
Yeah, those are out there too.
And of course, there's the ever popular, but, completely debunked ancient astronaut theory. It's amazing how that one just keeps resurfacing, isn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And then there was the notion of hot air balloons being used to oversee the project, which, well, while technically possible, seems a bit of a stretch as the main method for such a huge undertaking.
Seems unlikely, yeah.
This raises a really interesting point, though. Why do we often look for a single all-encompassing answer to these ancient puzzles?
Good question.
The fact that the Nazca people left no written records means we're always going to be in the realm of interpretation, right?
Right.
What's so revealing is how our understanding has evolved from that initial sort of astronomical focus to a much more integrated view that takes into account their environment, their rituals, their broader cultural beliefs.
So the mystery isn't just the lines themselves.
Exactly. It's also about how our own perspectives and the evidence we prioritize shape our understanding of a civilization that left no written account behind.
Well said. Okay, now, let's shift our focus to another truly iconic ancient site, Machu Picchu.
Ah, yes.
Just the image of that citadel perched so dramatically high in the Andes Mountains is breathtaking.
It really is.
And it was Hiram Bingham's discovery in 1911 that really brought it to global attention. Although, yeah, it's important to remember that local people in the region had always known it was there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable is its relatively short period of use, likely constructed in the mid-15th century under the Inca Emperor Pachacuti.
Pachacuti, right.
It seems to have been occupied for maybe only 80 to 100 years before being abandoned around the time the Spanish were conquering other parts of the Inca Empire.
Wow, that's not long at all.
Yet in that brief time, they created this incredible complex with its masterful stonework, thousands of steps, over 150 buildings. The Incas were masters of ashlar masonry, fitting stones together so perfectly they didn't need mortar. You can still see it incredibly well there.
Just incredible craftsmanship. So what was the purpose of this amazing place? We saw a few key theories in our sources. The idea that it was a royal retreat seems quite strong, right? Given its location away from Cusco, the relatively small size suggesting it wasn't a major city, and what looked like quite luxurious living quarters for the Inca elite.
That's certainly a leading theory. Its secluded location and the nature of some of the architecture definitely suggest it served as a place for the Inca nobility to relax, maybe entertain.
Okay.
However, if we consider the broader Inca worldview, it's difficult to really separate the secular from the sacred.
Right, because the theory that it was a sacred or religious site is also really compelling.
Very.
Its position high above the Urubamba River, which was considered holy, its proximity to sacred mountain peaks, the Apis plus those key structures like the Temple of the Sun with its solstice alignments, the Intihuatana Stone, the Hitching Post of the Sun, and the Temple of the Condor. It all strongly suggests ceremonial and astronomical significance.
Exactly. And this is where the most widely accepted idea of a sort of combined purpose comes into play.
Okay, so not just one thing.
Probably not.
Yeah.
In Inca society, the emperor was considered divine, so a royal estate would inherently have a sacred dimension. Daily life for the elite would likely have integrated both political and religious practices in a way we might not fully grasp with our more, compartmentalized thinking.
That makes sense.
So Machu Picchu was probably both a royal getaway and a very important spiritual center.
We also touched on some other less dominant theories, maybe an administrative hub, economic center, military outpost, even a site for crop testing or a prison.
Yeah, lots of ideas floated.
And of course, the early, now discredited idea about it being a home for the Virgins of the Sun. It's fascinating how many potential roles have been proposed over the years.
It is, and what's particularly interesting is that initial estimates suggested a relatively small elite population living there.
Right.
But more recent DNA analysis of remains found at the site tells a different story. It appears the inhabitants weren't solely nobles. There was actually a diverse population drawn from across the Inca Empire, including retainers and servants, the Yanacona.
Oh, interesting. So more like a cosmopolitan center.
Exactly.
Yeah.
More complex than initially thought.
And the big question, of course, is why was it ultimately abandoned? It seems Spanish conquest likely played a big role, even though the conquistadors never actually found Machu Picchu itself.
That's the prevailing idea.
Perhaps disease or just the general upheaval and instability of the era led to its desertion. The Incas did establish a new capital further in the jungle at Vilcabamba, right?
They did. And this raises a crucial point about how we interpret the evidence. We tend to categorize things royal, religious, administrative.
Yeah, we put things in boxes.
But for the Inca, these aspects were likely far more interconnected. The enduring mystery of Machu Picchu's purpose might stem less from a lack of concrete evidence and more from our inherent difficulty in fully understanding a worldview that wasn't so neatly divided.
Absolutely. Okay, our final dive into ancient enigmas takes us to the intriguing phenomenon of elongated skulls. These weren't just found at Machu Picchu, but all over the globe, right?
That's right. I mean, we're talking ancient Iraq, Central Asia, parts of Europe and Africa, and very prominently in pre-Columbian cultures throughout the Americas. It was surprisingly widespread.
Wow.
And what's so interesting is that this distinctive skull shape wasn't natural. It was a result of a deliberate cultural practice known as artificial cranial deformation, or ACD.
ACD, okay.
Essentially, during infancy, when the skull bones are still quite soft and malleable, they applied sustained pressure over a long time to reshape them.
How did they do that?
Various methods. Binding with cloth called chuco, clamping the head between wooden boards, which could produce those flattened or more box-like shapes, and even using padded boards or specially shaped cradles.
Huh. And the reasons behind this practice seem to have been quite varied, but a big one appears to be as a marker of social status.
Yes, that seems very likely.
The discovery of these elongated skulls in elite burials, like those at Machu Picchu, suggests it was a way to visually distinguish social classes, nobility, or specific family lineages. We even saw in the Calagua Society the degree of elongation, the taller and narrower the head, actually correlated with higher social standing.
Exactly. It functioned as a powerful visual cue. And if we connect this to the idea of cultural or ethnic identity, it also served to differentiate one group from another, especially in regions with diverse populations.
Yeah.
Different groups might have even adopted distinct styles of deformation, much like the difference between the Calagua's very tall heads and the flatter heads of the Cavanos people.
So, like a cultural marker. Beyond signaling status and identity, there also seems to have been an aesthetic component, right? Like maybe they thought it looked better.
It seems so. In some cultures, these modified head shapes were actually considered more beautiful or a sign of nobility. There's even a fascinating Mayan account where their gods apparently told their ancestors they would appear noble by adopting these elongated head shapes.
Wow.
And then there are the more symbolic, religious, or cosmological interpretations, potential links to their understanding of the cosmos, or maybe part of important initiation rites.
So lots of possible reasons. This brings up a really important point, though, about debunking some of the more sensational, sort of pseudoscientific claims surrounding these skulls.
Oh, definitely.
Their unusual appearance has unfortunately led to a lot of unfounded theories about aliens or separate human subspecies, hasn't it?
It has, but the scientific consensus is very clear.
Yeah.
This is a human cultural practice, full stop.
Right.
While the shape of the skull is altered, the overall cranial volume, the space for the brain, remains within the normal human range. There's absolutely no credible scientific evidence to suggest any impairment of cognitive function.
Okay, that's key.
And anomalous features like missing sutures, those natural seams in the skull, are simply a result of how the skull bones were reshaped during development.
So really, these elongated skulls are like a fascinating form of body modification, a nonverbal way of communicating really significant social and cultural information, especially in societies maybe without widespread literacy.
Exactly. It's as if the body itself becomes a text conveying status, identity, deeply held beliefs.
And it's interesting that the practice often declined or disappeared with major societal shifts like colonization.
Precisely. It wasn't just a random fashion trend. It was deeply interwoven with the social fabric and belief systems of these cultures. The real mystery lies not in some outlandish origin, but in fully deciphering the rich cultural language that these intentionally altered forms represented.
Fascinating stuff. Before we move on from the ancient world, we did briefly touch upon a few other intriguing puzzles. Great Zimbabwe,
The stone ruins,
the Yonaguni Monument off Japan, that underwater thing,
natural or artificial, still debated.
the incredible stonework of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, how they moved those massive stones,
Yeah, the logistics are mind-boggling.
and those controversial Roman-era amphoras reported in Brazil. Each of those could easily be a whole deep dive in itself.
They certainly could. They all serve as powerful reminders of our ongoing efforts to understand the ingenuity, beliefs, and ultimate fate of past civilizations based on the physical remnants they left behind.
Okay, let's transition from these ancient whittles to a more recent and perhaps more unsettling category of mystery. Cases where people have simply vanished without a trace.
Right. The disappearances.
And we absolutely have to begin with what is often considered America's oldest unsolved mystery, the lost colony of Roanoke.
Ah, Roanoke. This story is truly haunting and has captured imaginations for centuries. So, 1587, a group of 115 English colonists tried to set up a permanent settlement on Roanoke Island off the coast of what's now North Carolina.
Okay.
But when their governor, John White, finally gets back from a crucial supply trip to England, a trip seriously delayed by the Anglo-Spanish War,
Right, the war messed things up.
the entire colony had just vanished. No bodies, no signs of struggle or attack, just the incredibly eerie carving of Croatoan on a fence post and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree.
That Croatoan clue is so tantalizing, isn't it? It was the name of a nearby island and the name of a friendly Native American tribe living there.
Exactly. White himself believed that the colonists had simply moved to Croatoan Island, especially since they had an agreement leave a Maltese cross as a signal if they were forced to move under duress, and he didn't find one.
But you couldn't check.
Tragically, no. A severe storm prevented him from sailing to Croatoan Island to investigate further. He never saw his family, including his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, again.
Oh, heartbreaking.
And what's fascinating is how our understanding of this event has really evolved over time. The most widely supported theory among historians and archaeologists today is that the colonists, facing dwindling supplies and difficult conditions, basically chose to integrate with the local Native American communities,
Assimilation.
primarily the Croatoan tribe on Hatteras Island, or maybe even with other allied groups inland.
And there's actually a growing body of evidence that supports this assimilation theory, isn't there? Archaeological finds of late 16th century European artifacts at Native American sites in the region.
Right, like Site X and Site Y.
And even later accounts from the Jamestown colony of Native Americans, speaking of people dressed like the English living among them or having distinctly European features.
John Lawson's notes from 1701 are key here. He mentioned Hatteras natives who claimed white ancestors and even talked in a book.
That's pretty compelling.
It is. And if we look at broader historical patterns of early European colonization, it wasn't actually uncommon for settlers to integrate into Native American societies, sometimes out of necessity for survival, other times by choice, relationships, intermarriage.
So it happened elsewhere, too.
Yeah. So assimilation with local tribes seems like a very plausible and increasingly accepted scenario for Roanoke.
Of course, other theories have persisted over the years: massacre by hostile native groups or the Spanish, disease, starvation, natural disaster.
Those are possibilities, but the complete lack of any bodies at the Roanoke settlement itself makes a large-scale violent event there less likely.
Good point.
And the accumulating evidence pointing towards relocation makes the theory of complete annihilation less convincing. There's even the idea that maybe the colonists split up into smaller groups, some to Croatoan, others inland to different native communities.
Right, maybe not all went to the same place.
This brings up a really important point about the narrative itself, though. The story is so often framed as the lost colony, right? Emphasizing this complete mysterious disappearance.
Yeah, that's the famous phrase.
But despite Governor White's own interpretation of the Croatoan carving and the growing evidence suggesting assimilation, that more dramatic and enigmatic lost narrative has really endured in popular culture.
Why do you think that is?
Well, perhaps it reflects a human preference for a more sensational mystery over the perhaps less dramatic, but ultimately more likely, story of adaptation, resilience, and cultural merging. It's crucial to remember the colonists weren't just passive victims. They likely made active choices for their own survival in a really challenging new world.
Absolutely. Okay, now, moving from an entire colony vanishing to a very specific and incredibly audacious disappearance. The case of D.B. Cooper.
Ah, Cooper. The ultimate disappearing act.
This individual hijacked a Boeing 727 in 1971, demanded a huge ransom and 4 parachutes, and then just leaped out of the back of the plane in midair, never seen again. It's the stuff of true legend.
It truly is a captivating story, so many intriguing details. The description of Dan Cooper, a name actually coined by the media by mistake.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a reporter misheard it. Anyway, The briefcase he claimed contained a bomb, his demand for $200,000, and those 4 parachutes.
4 parachutes, why 4?
Still debated. Maybe to make them think he had an accomplice, or maybe just to ensure he got a working one. Who knows?
Huh.
Then the meticulous exchange of passengers for the cash and parachutes in Seattle. The subsequent flight toward Mexico City at low altitude, slow speed, landing gear down. Flaps extended, all very unusual flight parameters.
Yeah, very specific instructions.
And then, somewhere around 8:00 p.m. over southwestern Washington state, he simply opened the aft air stair, a feature unique to that model, the 727, and jumped into the night. The fact that his true identity remains unknown just adds to the mystique.
And the FBI's investigation, codenamed Enorjack, was absolutely massive, wasn't it?
Huge. Hundreds of interviews, numerous composite sketches circulated. They thoroughly searched the aircraft.
Did they find anything on the plane?
Not much. Some latent fingerprints that couldn't be matched, his black clip-on necktie, a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and 2 of the 4 parachutes left behind.
They even considered using an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane for reconnaissance, I read, though it didn't work out.
Right. The weather and conditions were terrible for searching. Yet, despite all that effort, nothing concrete ever turned up regarding Cooper himself.
What's so fascinating is the very limited amount of physical evidence they did manage to recover later. In 1980, almost a decade after the hijacking.
Yeah, the money found by the river.
A young boy, Brian Ingram, discovered $5,800 in deteriorated ransom bills along the banks of the Columbia River at a place called Tina Bar.
And how did that money get there? Was it carried by river currents? Had it been buried and then eroded? Maybe moved during dredging operations? Still debated.
Just adds another layer of mystery. And then there was the necktie and tie clip left on the plane.
Right. They yielded a partial DNA profile years later with new technology, but unfortunately not enough for a definitive identification. And of course, the 2 remaining parachutes, one of which was apparently a non-functional training chute.
A training chute? Seriously?
Yep, which raises more questions about his actual expertise or lack thereof.
So the FBI's long-held prevailing theory is that Cooper likely didn't survive the jump, right?
That's their main stance, yeah.
I mean, think about it. Nighttime, raining, over rugged wilderness, wearing just a business suit and loafers. Not exactly ideal skydiving conditions.
Not at all.
And there's no indication he had any real parachuting experience. Plus, the vast majority of the ransom money has never been recovered or put back into circulation.
That's certainly the most logical conclusion based on the evidence. Extremely dangerous jump, terrible conditions, probably inexperienced.
But the public imagination, right, it's always been captivated by the more romantic idea that he somehow survived and successfully vanished with the money.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that nobody has ever been definitively identified as D.B. Cooper keeps that possibility, however remote, alive.
And then there have been numerous suspects over the years. Richard McCoy Jr., who did a very similar hijacking a few months later.
Yep, he's often mentioned. Renewed interest recently with claims from his kids and a possible parachute link.
And I always found that FBI agent Larry Carr's theory intriguing, suggesting Cooper might have had prior military experience, maybe Air Force cargo loading, and maybe inspired by a French-Canadian comic book hero also named Dan Cooper.
Yeah, that's a fascinating angle, too. It all just adds to the speculation.
It's just incredible that the FBI only officially closed the active investigation in 2016, after 45 years. And it remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in U.S. commercial aviation history.
45 years.
Wow.
It really speaks to the enduring power of an unresolved mystery, doesn't it? The almost mythical image of this audacious anti-hero who seemingly got away with it.
And maybe a little bit of collective fascination with the fact that the authorities just couldn't crack it.
Exactly. The D.B. Cooper story beautifully illustrates how the lack of a definitive resolution can often be far more compelling and enduring in our cultural memory than a neatly tied-up ending.
Absolutely. The sheer boldness, the unanswered questions about the money, the FBI's failure, it all fuels the legend.
Before we move into the chilling realm of unsolved crimes, we also looked at a few other truly baffling disappearances, the Mary Celeste. That ghost ship found adrift, totally seaworthy, but the whole crew just gone.
Eerie. Theories range from alcohol fume explosions to water spouts, but nothing conclusive.
And the Devil's Sea near Japan, sometimes called the Dragon's Triangle, like the Bermuda Triangle of the Pacific.
Yeah, lots of disappearances attributed to it. Scientific explanations point to underwater volcanoes, methane hydrates, complex currents. But the stories persist. Amelia Earhart potentially vanished near there, too.
Then the vanishing of Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt while swimming at Cheviot Beach in '67.
Right, rough conditions. He had a shoulder injury. Massive search found nothing. officially ruled accidental drowning, but still,
Yeah.
a serving PM just disappears.
And the deeply tragic case of the Beaumont children in Australia, 1966. 3 young siblings vanished from a beach in broad daylight.
Just heartbreaking. So
Yeah.
many false sightings, a huge investigation, even a controversial psychic involved, but still unsolved.
Yeah.
A painful open wound for Australia.
All of these cases just leave behind this profound and unsettling sense of unanswered questions and lingering unease, don't they?
They really do. Whether it's a whole ship's crew, a head of state, or innocent kids, these vanishings tap into a very primal fear of the unknown and highlight the fragility of life.
Now, let's enter some truly chilling territory. Unsolved crimes. And we have to begin by acknowledging that terrifying archetype of the unidentified serial killer who casts such a long shadow.
A truly terrifying figure indeed. And the Zodiac Killer in the U.S. is a particularly chilling example. Active in Northern California, late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
Officially linked to at least 5 murders, though he claimed many more. His notoriety came largely from those taunting letters and incredibly complex ciphers he sent to newspapers and police.
The ciphers are legendary.
And the fact that some remained unbroken for decades, one, the 340 cipher was only cracked in 2020, just adds to the disturbing nature of the case.
And still no definitive ID, right? Despite tons of suspects like Arthur Lee Allen.
No definitive proof. His true identity and the full scope of his crimes remain uncertain.
He's often seen as the modern American counterpart to Jack the Ripper, who, back in 1888 London, really established that archetype of the elusive killer taunting the authorities.
Exactly. And then there's the case of the Wednesday Strangler in Japan. A series of 7 brutal murders of girls and women in Saga Prefecture over 14 years, from 75 to 89.
And a Wednesday connection.
Most vanished on Wednesdays, and 5 were strangled. This case is further complicated because it's intertwined with the North Kanto young girls serial kidnapping and murder case.
Which had a wrongful conviction.
Right, Toshikazu Sugaya was convicted and later exonerated. The actual perpetrator or perpetrators responsible for both sets of crimes, including the still unsolved 94 disappearance of Yukari Yokoyama, remain at large. The idea that someone can commit such acts and evade capture for so long is deeply unsettling.
Profoundly so.
Yeah.
And then you have these individual sensational murders that just seize the public imagination and leave so many agonizing questions. The Black Dahlia case in the U.S.
Elizabeth Short, 1947, L.A.
The gruesome discovery of her bisected and mutilated body. It immediately became a massive media sensation. The taunting notes sent to the press only added to the macabre fascination.
And despite numerous suspects over the decades, the case grew cold, partly due to lost and mishandled evidence early on. A definitive resolution seems increasingly unlikely now.
Such a famous yet frustrating case. And the JonBenet Ramsey case, the tragic murder of a 6-year-old child beauty pageant star in her own home in Boulder, Colorado, 1996.
Yeah, that one shocked everyone.
The initial report of a kidnapping, the ransom note, then finding her body later that same day. Head trauma, strangulation, sexual assault. Horrific.
And the initial police response was heavily criticized, wasn't it? Failure to properly secure the crime scene, potential contamination of evidence.
Exactly. It's fueled decades of intense public scrutiny and debate. Theories involving an intruder, family friends, even her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, or her brother, Burke. But no arrests ever made.
The combination of the child victim, the wealthy family, the pageant culture, the flawed investigation, it keeps the public interest incredibly high.
Yeah. What's both fascinating and deeply disturbing about some of these Japanese cases, like the Setagaya family massacre in Tokyo in 2000, is the sheer strangeness of the details.
That one is bizarre.
4 members of a family murdered in their home, yet the killer apparently stayed there for hours afterward, used their computer, ate their food, used their first aid kit, maybe even took a nap.
And left behind so much evidence. Clothing, a bag, the murder weapon, a kitchen knife, an abundance of forensic evidence, including DNA.
But still no idea who did it or why.
Identity and motive remain completely unknown. It's a particularly notorious unsolved crime in Japan because of that disconnect between the evidence and the lack of a suspect.
Wow. And then there are the Hakioji supermarket murders in 1995. 3 female employees shot dead in the office, bound with tape.
Right. Robbery seemed like a possible motive, but it's unclear. Several suspects were considered over the years, a Chinese man extradited but not charged, a deceased individual whose fingerprint matched one at the scene, but still unresolved.
Europe has its own share of these chilling enigmas, too. The Hinterkaifeck murders in Germany in 1922, just unbelievably gruesome and bizarre.
Yeah, that one is straight out of a horror movie. 6 inhabitants of an isolated farmstead killed with a mattock, a type of pickaxe.
And the strange stuff beforehand. The maid quitting due to noises, an unfamiliar newspaper appearing, tracks leading to the farm but not away, footsteps in the attic.
Super creepy. And the perpetrator, or perpetrators, apparently lived in the house for at least 3 days after the murders before vanishing without a trace. No clear motive, no identified killer.
Gives you chills. And the case of the Isdal woman in Norway in 1970, another incredibly perplexing European mystery.
Definitely. A partially burned body of an unidentified woman found in a remote valley called Isdalen, Ice Valley.
And the items nearby seem deliberately arranged, labels removed from everything.
Exactly. Jewelry, clothing remnants, purse, burned paper scraps, all identifying marks gone. Then 2 suitcases linked to her were found at a railway station containing wigs, maps, timetables, multiple currencies, coded notes.
Coded notes. Sounds like a spy novel.
Well, she had traveled extensively using multiple fake passports and aliases, and witnesses reported her being very guarded and secretive. Given the Cold War context and potential links to secret Norwegian missile trials, espionage theories definitely took hold.
But the official ruling was suicide.
Suicide by pills and self-immolation, yes. But many remain unconvinced, suspecting intelligence agency involvement. Her true identity is still unknown.
And then there's the highly controversial case of the MI6 spy in a bag, Gareth Williams. GCHQ codebreaker seconded to MI6, found dead inside a locked hold-all in his bathtub in London, 2010.
The details are just baffling.
The key to the padlock was inside the bag with his body. Escape experts said it was virtually impossible for him to lock himself in like that.
Plus, MI6 delayed reporting him missing, which added to the suspicion.
Right. The initial coroner's inquest ruled his death unnatural and likely criminal. But then a later police review controversially concluded it was likely an accidental death during autoerotic activity.
A conclusion that remains highly contested by his family and many others. Officially undetermined and highly suspicious circumstances.
These cases really underscore how crucial those initial stages of an investigation are, don't they? Early mistakes like failing to secure the scene or mishandling evidence in JonBenet Ramsey or Black Dahlia, they can compromise a case permanently.
Absolutely. And conversely, even when you have abundant clues, like in Setagaya or Hinterkaifeck, if that crucial link to a specific suspect is missing, the case can just stay cold forever. It highlights how vital those first hours and days are, and how much forensic science relies on the integrity of the evidence collected right at the start.
And the role that information flow and control plays in these enduring mysteries is so significant. The cryptic communications from killers like Zodiac or the Black Dahlia notes, they're like psychological warfare, but also potential clues.
Right, and similarly, the secrecy and obfuscation surrounding cases like the Isdal woman, Gareth Williams, and even the death of Rodney Marks in Antarctica, which we'll get to. It often fuels conspiracy theories and actively prevents closure.
That perceived lack of cooperation or transparency from institutions, like the allegations in the Rodney Marks case involving the National Science Foundation and Raytheon, that can hinder investigations and breed suspicion, too.
It really emphasizes how the management and sometimes the deliberate manipulation of information is often a central element in what makes these mysteries so enduring.
Okay, our final deep dive takes us to the most remote and arguably the most mysterious continent on Earth, Antarctica.
Ah, the frozen continent.
Its extreme environment and profound isolation make it almost a perfect setting for mysteries, both scientific and those that venture into the realm of, well, the unexplained.
Indeed. Beneath Antarctica's vast, seemingly uniform ice cap lies a hidden and incredibly diverse world. Hundreds of subglacial lakes kept liquid by geothermal heat and immense pressure miles below the ice.
Like Lake Vostok, huge, isolated for millions of years.
It's exactly intense speculation about potential unique microbial life down there.
Wow.
Scientists have even managed to drill into smaller lakes like Lake Whillans and found surprisingly diverse ecosystems thriving on chemical energy, not sunlight.
Amazing. And then there are things like blood falls, that striking red plume flowing from the Taylor Glacier.
Yeah, that's incredible. Its source is an ancient, hypersaline, iron-rich, oxygen-lacking subglacial lake. The red color comes from the iron oxidizing when it hits the air, a visible indicator of the hidden water systems beneath the ice.
It's just mind-boggling to think about these completely isolated environments and the strange life, like those hemoglobin-lacking ice fish in the Weddell Sea, literally see-through fish.
Exactly. And even the phenomenon of singing ice. Those low-frequency seismic vibrations in the massive ice shelves. It's like a whole other planet hidden down there.
And the continent's unique geography has led to some interesting anomalies too, right? Like the Wilkes Land gravity anomaly.
Right? A large area where gravity is different than predicted, leading to theories it might be a massive impact crater, maybe linked to the Permian-Triassic extinction event.
And those recurring mystery holes, or polynyas, big openings in the winter sea ice.
Yeah, especially in the Weddell Sea. The current scientific thinking involves strong winds pushing ice and the upwelling of warmer, saltier water that resists freezing.
And the McMurdo Dry Valley is the largest ice-free region, like a cold desert, used as a Mars analog.
Precisely. These natural features are amazing, but sometimes they get kind of twisted into more speculative claims.
Like the online images, often from Google Earth, that some people claim are ancient pyramids in the Ellsworth Mountains.
Right. Geologically, they're explained as Nunataks exposed mountain peaks shaped by natural erosion into pyramid-like forms, not man-made.
And then, of course, the persistent conspiracy theories about secret Nazi bases, Base 211 or New Swabia, supposedly for advanced tech and UFOs after WWDII.
Yeah, those theories are out there. The evidence usually cited is the German Schwabenland expedition of 1938-39, which did make territorial claims for whaling, and the rumored arrival of a few German U-boats in Argentina after the war.
But no real link to an Antarctic base.
No credible link. These ideas often blend with broader UFO lore and the trope of a hidden, forbidden sector in Antarctica. Pure speculation, really.
But there have been some genuine historical puzzles in Antarctica as well, haven't there? Like that abandoned lifeboat found on Bouvet Island in 1964.
Right. Oars, barrels, no bodies. It was a mystery for a while until it was revealed to be linked to a Soviet whaling ship shore party stranded there briefly in 1958.
Ah, okay. And the Falkland Islands wolf, the wara, the only native land mammal there, extinct by 1876. How did it even get there?
That was a big puzzle. Genetic studies show its ancestors diverged long ago. The plausible explanation is migration during past ice ages via a land bridge or sea ice from South America.
And the famous Peary race map. Early 16th century, some claim it shows an ice-free Antarctic coastline centuries before its discovery.
That's a controversial one.
Mm-hmm.
Mainstream cartographic analysis largely refutes that interpretation, attributing the features to known South American landmasses or just the map-making conventions of the time, not evidence of ancient ice-free Antarctica.
But perhaps one of the most unsettling and genuinely mysterious events in recent Antarctic history is the unsolved death of Rodney Marks in 2000.
Yes, a very disturbing case. An Australian astrophysicist working at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station became acutely ill, died just 36 hours later in May 2000.
And the investigation faced huge challenges, right? His body couldn't be flown out for 6 months because of the winter.
Exactly. The eventual autopsy revealed the cause of death was methanol poisoning. But the crucial question remains, where did the fatal dose of methanol come from?
Suicide was considered unlikely.
Deemed unlikely, yeah. Given his positive personal life, the fact he actively sought medical help. Accidental ingestion is possible, but foul play couldn't be definitively ruled out, leading to speculation about the first South Pole murder.
And jurisdictional issues complicated things. Australian citizen, U.S. station, NZ investigation.
Plus, reported difficulties getting complete information and cooperation from the National Science Foundation and Raytheon, the contractor running the station. The long delay also inevitably impacted evidence and witness recall.
So it remains officially unsolved.
Officially unsolved, Rodney Marks' family eventually stopped actively pursuing answers. In a poignant gesture, a mountain in Antarctica was named Mount Marks in his memory.
Wow. It seems like the sheer remoteness and inherent mystery of Antarctica really lend themselves to these kinds of sensational theories and speculations, doesn't it? Sometimes overshadowing the real science.
It really does. The extreme isolation allows the imagination to run wild.
Yeah.
Many of these Antarctic mysteries, when you look closely, often reveal more about our own human psychology, our fascination with the unknown, our tendency towards conspiracy thinking, than about the continent itself.
That's a good point.
Even genuine scientific wonders can be easily misinterpreted or woven into unfounded tales in such an isolated, poorly understood place. We need to be careful to distinguish legitimate scientific puzzles from baseless conjecture.
And the Rodney Marks case tragically underscores the immense practical difficulties of investigating anything in such extreme, isolated environments governed by complex international agreements like the Antarctic Treaty System.
Absolutely. Multinational personnel, differing legal jurisdictions, huge logistical constraints, close-knit communities, perceived institutional hurdles. It all contributes to unresolved cases and the overall mystique surrounding Antarctica.
Well, as we bring this deep dive into some of the world's most intriguing unsolved mysteries to a close, a few key themes really stand out, don't they?
They really do.
The critical importance and often the fragility of evidence over time.
Mm.
The sheer spectrum of theories that can emerge when definitive answers are elusive.
The double-edged sword of technology, too. Sometimes helping solve, sometimes creating new mysteries.
Right, the powerful role of narrative and the media in shaping how we remember these cases.
And ultimately, the very human element, grief, terror, curiosity, and that persistent, almost primal drive to find answers.
Absolutely. And if we connect this back to the psychology of mystery, it really taps into our fundamental human desire for order, for understanding, for finding closure.
Definitely. These unsolved cases create a kind of cognitive dissonance, an unsettling gap in our knowledge that our imaginations often rush to fill.
And sometimes, maybe surprisingly, the very ambiguity of a mystery can be more compelling and enduring than a neat resolution. It allows these stories to resonate across generations, keep being retold.
It's truly remarkable to consider the sheer variety and global reach of these enduring enigmas. From ancient civilizations to modern crimes, disappearances, even the secrets under Antarctic ice.
And while the reality is that many of these puzzles will likely remain unsolved, lost to time, obscured by circumstance, maybe intentionally concealed,
The very act of investigating them, of asking those hard questions, critically evaluating the evidence, acknowledging the ambiguities, that process itself leads us to a deeper, more nuanced understanding.
an understanding of our shared history, human nature, and maybe the limits of what we can definitively know.
Which raises a really important final thought for you, the listener, to consider. These global enigmas, in their persistent unsolved state, serve as constant, compelling reminders of the vast unknown that still surrounds us, even in our superconnected high-tech world. They
Mhm.
continually challenge us to explore, to question our assumptions, and to maintain a sense of wonder about the world and its many secrets. Ultimately, they reflect humanity's enduring engagement with the complex, often mysterious tapestry of our existence.
And on that note, we certainly encourage you to continue your own exploration and questioning of the unknown. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us.